After viewing Longlegs, I couldn't help but be reminded of my love for The Shining. The artistry, the performances, of course, but also the interpretability. Over the course of 40-some years, this movie has amassed such a wide array of different interpretations and expressions, some of them involving the subtlety of Nicholson's performance, others optimistically pin the events of the film to just being retellings of Jack's novel, but my personal favorite outlook has always been its approach to domestic abuse. To think that the horrors we see in this film aren't concrete, but rather explanations created by a child to simplify what he sees but cannot explain, is exactly why I love not just that film, but horror movies as a whole. They're a completely different filter when it comes to expressing very human issues. At least that goes for the horror films of the past. Director Oz Perkins has insinuated that contemporary horror doesn't really have that level of engagement, and whether you agree with him or not, it makes it very clear that Longlegs is an echo of the conventions of older films such as The Shining, presenting us with ungraspable horror and leaving us with nothing to do but to simplify what we cannot explain. When people watch these types of movies, there's always that expectation of the unknown. Going back to The Shining, there's so much about that movie that goes unexplained. It's never addressed why Jack snapped, what is the point of Red Drum, why the hell was that dude in a bear costume giving that guy a blowjob. Longlegs feels as if it lends itself to very little in terms of interpretability, even going as far as to literally tell you when each act of the movie starts within its 3-act structure. Our protagonist, Lee Harker, has a surprising amount of clairvoyance when it comes to solving the serial killer's riddles. It doesn't even give us a chance to unmask what they could even mean. She just instantly solves them whenever it's handed to her. The main mystery ultimately revolves around Satan, so any motive that could be distinctly human is immediately thrown out the window. Unsurprisingly, it's this level of transparency that has pulled some people away from the film. We want a level of engagement. We want to be able to solve the mystery alongside the protagonist, but the pacing of Longlegs feels so distant, almost separate from us as a viewer. Everything moves as if we have no input on anything. Lee is out here solving the mystery before it even feels tangible. All we can do is just sit and listen. All we can do is just believe what we're told. Telling, not showing, is almost a very common thing in this movie. There's even an entire narration around the 3rd act. Lee's mother basically reveals the crux of this mystery, what happened, how it happened, and what's next. This makes it so the things we do see but aren't mentioned stand out just as much. For a film that focuses so heavily on Satan and hell, the cinematography focuses a lot on lighting. Beaming lights will shine through dark, barren interiors. Characters will be purposefully placed away from brighter areas to represent how deep they're digging themselves into the mystery. One of my favorite shots in this movie is the one where Lee and Carter go into the barn to find the first doll, and there's 2 gleaming lights coming from seemingly nowhere. Like, it's dark outside. Where did those lights even come from? I like how the camera lingers so much after the point of a shot is established, like it's refusing to move closer for our own good. Lee's pretty motionless as a protagonist, so it makes sense that the camera acts as her rather than with her. It's shocking how little we actually get to know about Lee as a person. We don't know her interests, we don't know what she's like. All we know is that she wanted to be an actress when she was younger. And it all goes back to my point that she ultimately feels so lifeless to us as a viewer. She feels so detached from us. This entire movie builds up to her confronting her mother about a traumatic event from her childhood, and even in that moment, she rarely musters beyond her bleak and stoic exterior. Lee's trauma ultimately defines the movie, even if her reaction doesn't show it. Her clairvoyance could be a direct result from it. Maybe that's what it represented all along. There's so much satanic imagery in this movie that it makes you wonder, is it really as simple as pinning the blame on demons, or is it a representation for something hiding underneath? Maybe Lee being possessed by the devil is just a facade to describe her trauma. Being approached by a stranger at such a young age, her mother allows that stranger to enter her home, allowing her to be linked to the devil for the rest of her life. If you strip the story down, you can create some very disturbing illustrations about childhood trauma. Every victim in this movie is either a mother or a very young girl, targeted by a father. There's a phone call in this movie where a father shakingly admits to a police dispatcher that he can only do what he wants to do to his daughter when her eyes are closed. Lee is so hesitant to remember what happened to her as a child that we aren't even supposed to know it's her in the beginning of the movie, mimicking real-life victims who cannot or refuse to recall their past traumas. This is a detail I didn't notice, but there's a scene in this movie where Lee has to assign a bunch of random shapes and photos to words. She's presented with an inverted triangle, the main symbol used by Longlegs, and she says, "Father." Why does Lee see Longlegs as this father-like figure? He came into her life at a young age and did something to her that she was forced to repress into her adult years, but her investigation forced her to open up. It forces her to confront her past, to confront her mother about this man who is haunting her even as an adult. And when she finally finds the truth, her mother shoots a doll made to resemble her as a child, freeing her from the repression she's held since she was a child. The film hides a lot under its pivot to a Satan-centered narrative within the third act. Why bother trying to dig a hole that's already dug? The movie, again, has a very explicit narration that explains literally everything that happened. What mystery is there to be had? If there was something to be said, why does the movie make such an effort to be so transparent? Because that's exactly what Lee's mother did to her. The narration in the third act was just an explanation, but not the truth. This entire movie is about confronting something that is entrapped. Lee's mother lied to her about Longlegs, the same way that she was probably lying to us about the truth in this movie. But why? Why lie to the audience like this? It's to protect us. This entire movie is about the lies we tell children to keep them safe from digging closer to the truth. The entire twist of this movie revolves around the mother admitting that she lied to her daughter to protect her, the same way the movie lies to us by showing us these glaring, spectacle-driven depictions of Satan and creepy dolls to hide the real haunting messages the movie refuses to do anything but just allude to. And this isn't even deep analysis on my end. The very director of this movie has said as much, so why wouldn't a movie like this lie to us? It all goes back to our relationship with Lee Harker as a protagonist. Our inability to do anything but just sit and listen, to just accept what we're told. That is what makes Longlegs so captivating, the realization that everything we see and hear could just be lies. And just like with The Shining, that surely isn't the only interpretation. That's just what I saw. There are so many different ways you can read this movie. There's probably aspects of it that will go unexplained, like why did Longlegs go to this random convenience store? Why did Lee ultimately get possessed at the end? What was that guy in the bear costume doing with that guy in the movie? But at the end of it all, there's nothing concrete about Longlegs, just like the horror classics that clearly influenced it. It leaves us with nothing to grasp at. We can only simplify what we cannot explain.